Google processes billions of searches every day, managing a volume of data that few other systems can match. Thousands of cyber attacks hit their infrastructure daily. These attempts are neutralized almost instantly by a security team filled with world-class engineers. Even with these defenses, a microscopic vulnerability was hiding within billions of lines of code. It was a mistake so small that Google's own experts missed it. A teenager without professional resources or a corporate office made the discovery. He wasn't even old enough to vote. This find upends our assumptions about technology. It shows that even with a limitless budget, a digital fortress can never be truly flawless. Most people see the internet as a place for videos and news. He saw a machine of invisible parts, where every website and login page is a piece waiting to be understood. He was driven by curiosity, the refusal to accept that a system is impossible to penetrate, and the obsession with asking one question: what happens if I try this? His approach was simple. Systems follow rules created by humans. Whenever humans create rules, they eventually create mistakes. A patient outsider studying the system poses a unique threat to a technology monopoly. They have the time to look until those human errors reveal themselves. He began with pure observation. There were no malicious attacks and no intrusive software, just a careful look at how the system responded. He spent weeks analyzing public subdomains, ignored digital services, and hundreds of pages of documentation. Typical hackers use fast, automated scanning tools to find weaknesses. He chose a slow, manual examination of the smallest details. Eventually, he noticed a small inconsistency in the system's behavior. It was the kind of detail most professionals would dismiss as a random glitch. In cybersecurity, major failures often begin as tiny, boring anomalies. They are only visible to those with the patience to keep looking. He decided to pull the loose thread. He subjected the anomaly to escalating, deliberate tests to see how deep the error went. Each test produced an unexpected result. The inconsistency lived deep within the architecture, spanning across several connected layers. The evidence showed the system's behavior was completely unintentional. He had confirmed a legitimate security gap in the code. A teenager in his bedroom now had a way into one of the internet's most heavily guarded ecosystems. Finding the exploit created a choice. He could sell it for a high price on the black market, or take the path of responsible disclosure. He chose to report it. He prepared a file with documented evidence, ensuring every step he took could be verified by Google's team. After sending the report, there was only silence. He waited for days with no response from the corporation. Inside Google, the reaction changed the moment security engineers reviewed the data. They realized the teenager was correct. Google's ecosystem was saved because an outsider chose to report a blind spot instead of using it for himself. Google moved quickly to patch the vulnerability. They fixed the immediate error and secured the system. But patching the glitch revealed a second mystery. The error was a symptom of a deeper flaw in how the system's core components interact. This discovery leaves us with an unsettling question. If a teenager found a way into the world's largest tech company, how many other errors are still waiting in the code? When a software patch is deployed, the vulnerability is logged as resolved. For the engineers involved, the door to that specific threat is locked. After Google's security team closed the initial weakness, the teenager who reported it began looking at the logs again. He focused on a single question: how the error managed to exist within the production environment for so long. These bugs often serve as indicators of larger structural weaknesses. A single flaw in a line of code can point to an oversight in how the entire system architecture handles data. Human-built systems rely on layers of automation and manual oversight. As these layers grow more complex, they create clusters of related errors that often go unnoticed during a standard fix. He returned to the same digital environment, this time with no intention of triggering an exploit. He spent his time observing the way the server responded to standard, valid requests. While monitoring millions of routine interactions, he saw a subtle irregularity. A specific type of request was generating a response that deviated from the expected protocol by only a few bytes. This glitch was small enough to be dismissed as background noise by most developers. His curiosity, however, made it impossible to ignore, and he began a formal investigation into the source of the deviation. Major discoveries often begin as these seemingly harmless anomalies. They are found by individuals who pay attention to the details that standard security filters are programmed to overlook. He documented every anomalous response, recording the exact timestamp and system conditions for every behavior he witnessed. The resulting pattern showed that this wasn't a simple visual glitch. The data suggested a flaw in the logic governing how different parts of the system verify one another. For separate digital systems to communicate, they must establish a set of rules for verification. This process defines which components are permitted to share data and which are restricted. This chart maps the hierarchy used in this architecture. Computers verify servers, servers verify applications, and applications verify the end users. Each glowing link represents a successful handshake, confirming identity. But the teenager found a way to bypass the application layer entirely. He discovered the server would accept a direct command from a user if formatted to look like a trusted internal source. By exploiting this misplaced verification, a single user could gain the same level of access as a core system administrator, leading to a total collapse of the security model. Over several weeks, he mapped out a chain of these untested assumptions, proving that the system was trusting inputs that had never been properly validated. This weakness was dangerous because of its reach. A single point of entry allowed for the compromise of multiple overlapping layers of Google's infrastructure simultaneously. He submitted a comprehensive second report to Google. Because of his previous discovery, the response was immediate. Internal security protocols activated within minutes. Inside Google, analysts reproduced the findings and confirmed the flaw. Teams were pulled from other projects to begin an immediate audit of the affected systems. Security teams began searching their historical logs to determine if this specific path had been used before. They needed to know how long the door had been open and if any unauthorized data had been extracted. The most difficult part of resolving an interconnected flaw is accounting for the period of time it existed in secret. The primary concern is whether a malicious actor discovered the same path first and used it to establish a permanent presence. While the engineers worked on the final fixes, another team at Google looked into the background of the researcher who had submitted the reports. They found a history of detailed research and projects dating back years. This expertise wasn't the result of a single moment of inspiration, but a long-term commitment to understanding system behavior. This visualization represents the work required for a discovery of this scale. The reported vulnerability is only the visible tip. Supporting it are years of research, hundreds of failed attempts, and a developed capacity for pattern recognition. In cybersecurity, the ability to challenge underlying assumptions remains a constant requirement. While the software changes, the process of looking for the things others have missed does not. These breakthroughs are the result of thousands of hours of preparation. The discovery itself is simply the moment when that preparation finally meets a specific opportunity. Knowledge of these systems is neutral. The same understanding of network protocols can be applied to either defend an organization or to exploit it. The skills used by this teenager to protect Google's users are identical to those used by others to bypass security measures and disrupt infrastructure. Google identified the vulnerability because the right person found it first. However, the history of software security is marked by many instances where that was not the case. There are groups that actively search for these same flaws with the intent of keeping them hidden from the companies that could fix them. On dark web marketplaces, high-level vulnerabilities are treated as commodities. They are sold to the highest bidder, often for millions of dollars, specifically because they allow for undetected access to major platforms. Every time a bug is reported and fixed, it marks one successful outcome in a continuous effort to identify weaknesses before they can be utilized for a different purpose. In the popular imagination, hackers spend their lives breaking into systems. The reality is more patient. The most dangerous actors in the digital space spend their time looking, watching, waiting. Out on the furthest edges of the internet, raw information often carries more weight than direct system access. These hidden marketplaces allow identities to vanish, while stolen data is traded like any other commodity. It is an invisible economy operating just beneath the surface of the web. For years, a teenager had tracked stories of this world. He wasn't motivated by money or fame. He wanted to see how massive systems connected at their deepest levels, including the parts most people ignore. This underground economy is a primary battlefield for modern cybersecurity. It is a war fought with information, and here, information translates directly to power. By observing these communities, the teenager saw how vulnerabilities were discussed and traded. He found an environment where a single, overlooked weakness could be worth more than a luxury car. He discovered that the most devastating cyber attacks rarely begin with highly sophisticated malware. Usually, they start with a simple human mistake. Modern technology relies on millions of lines of code and thousands of interconnected systems. This creates a level of scale that no single human can fully comprehend. When thousands of moving parts interact, mistakes and overlooked assumptions become mathematically inevitable. Vulnerabilities don't exist because engineers lack skill. They exist because complexity creates blind spots. The real challenge is finding those flaws before an adversary does. While researching an underground forum one evening, the teenager found a casual discussion buried among hundreds of routine messages. The posters didn't mention specific companies or targets. However, the technical indicators they described were highly specific and familiar. He read the technical details several times. The language and the specific descriptions of the flaw matched a massive system weakness he had recently discovered himself. Someone else was hunting in the exact same territory. Another person had found the same opening, but they weren't planning to report it. The situation was no longer a technical challenge. It was an active race against an unseen actor who intended to weaponize the flaw. The teenager began tracking the forum posters' information, comparing technical details and analyzing patterns to determine if the threat was genuine. Days turned into weeks as the evidence accumulated. What began as a purely technical curiosity quickly escalated into a concrete, real-world risk. The anonymous poster hunted for profit. The teenager searched for understanding. Their technical scopes were identical, but their intentions were opposite. Looking past the code, he began to visualize the databases as collections of real lives. Behind every account was a person who would be affected if this flaw was exploited. Discovering a vulnerability provides a technical rush, but protecting the people behind the data carries a permanent, real-world responsibility. We often frame cybersecurity as a conflict between machines and code. The actual conflict happens between human decisions. One person chooses exploitation and profit. Another chooses disclosure and protection. The technology is only the battlefield. The code and the databases are inert until a human decision puts them in motion. The deciding factor in a digital crisis is not the strength of a firewall. It is the internal moral compass of the individual who finds the crack in the wall. The vulnerabilities were eventually reported, the systems were improved, and the immediate risk passed. But the underlying reality of the digital age hasn't changed. As long as technology is built by people, no system will be immune to human error. The teenager succeeded because he stayed curious longer than most people. He didn't have special access. He simply chose to keep looking when others stopped. The internet functions as a network of human creativity, human mistakes, and human curiosity. In a world focused on speed and complexity, the disciplined act of paying attention remains the most effective way to change the story.